let's go through the foundational 10 commandments and get just a small taste of the loving character of our Father in heaven. Now, you may think you have heard them already, but I bet most of you have never heard the actual 10 commandments. Most of our churches have erased over half of what was actually commanded so that they could continue in their spiritual adultery without being challenged. Some have removed entire commandments, like the second commandment, and then shuffled the numbers around and split some commandments up so that they can still add up to the number 10. Let's read the actual 10 commandments straight from the original source so that no one can pull the wool over our eyes. All right, the actual 10 commandments. You can read this in Exodus chapter 20. It says where God is speaking down from the fires on top of Mount Sinai with his own mouth. This is before he carved it in stone, where he speaks the 10 commandments. Okay, first commandment. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Okay, so in this first commandment, we see that God here is identifying himself specifically as Yehovah, thy Elohim, in the original Hebrew. The word you see in English, capital L-O-R-D, all capital letters, is actually the tetragrammaton, Yod-He-Vav-He, the name of God. Some call it Yahweh. So anytime you see the all capital letters, capital L-O-R-D in the Bible, this is actually the name of God, Yehovah, in the original text. Here in this first commandment, he is telling us his name so that we don't get him mixed up with the other gods. The author of these commandments is making it clear that he is not just one of the generic one-size-fits-all type gods, but is literally saying, I am Yehovah, your God, the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt and saved you from being slaves. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, what does this mean, before me? Is this saying that we have to worship him first, and then after him, we can worship other gods, as long as it's not before we worship him? No. The word before me in the Hebrew is panim, which means face, or in the face of, in the presence of. What Yehovah is actually saying here is, I am Yehovah, your God, the one who brought you out of Egypt. Now that's very specific. You shall have no other gods in my face, in front of me. I don't want you to bring any other gods in my presence. Now our Father takes his relationship with his people very seriously. In fact, he compares it to that of a marriage. He considers his people to be his bride, and he wants his bride to love him and only him alone. He doesn't want us running around with any old gods on the block. We are special to him, and he was offering to take very good care of us if we choose to stay by his side. Okay, that was pretty simple. The author of the first commandment clearly identifies himself as Yehovah, the God who brought Israel out of Egypt. And he said that he wants us to now commit to him and only him. We're not to run around with any other gods anymore. Out of deep love and compassion for us, he rescued us from the hands of Pharaoh and is telling us he wants us to be faithful to him. Now, how are we to be faithful to him? Move on to the second commandment. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, Yehovah thy Elohim, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me, and keep my commandments. Now, if this commandment sounds new to you, that is because many churches have neglected to tell you this one. Now, this is straight from Exodus chapter 20, where God Almighty first speaks the 10 Commandments to the nation of Israel from the fire on top of Mount Sinai with his own voice. It was spoken so loud from the mountain that the 1.5 million people who witnessed it actually thought they were going to die as the ground shook so bad. This same commandment was later reiterated when God himself carved it into stone with his own finger. So who are we to pretend like this commandment doesn't exist? It doesn't really matter what excuse any church may have for removing this law from their edited 10 Commandments tablets that they proudly displayed in their church front lawn. God Almighty has spoken clearly, and we need to choose whether we're going to follow him or follow some guy in a robe who thinks he knows better. In this commandment, our Father is telling us he doesn't want any objects, whether statues, paintings, icons, or otherwise, mixed up with his worship. He wants us to look to him and him alone when we worship. He wants us to leave our paganism aside and to embrace his true nature without polluting it with our modified sun worship accessories. He says here that he is a jealous God, in the same way that a loving husband is jealous of his wife, wanting her to be loyal. He forbids his bride from hanging on to her old boyfriend's picture and bringing her ex's t-shirt into the house so she can constantly be reminded of his cologne. Our Father doesn't want us to remember our longing for our old Babylonian sun worship days, and he doesn't want us to bring our old pagan accessories and keepsakes into his house. If we are to love him, then we are supposed to be faithful to him. So what's this second part where it says, "For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments." He tells us here that if we compromise and let our old paganism get mixed in with his worship, we're going to pass that iniquity down through our grandkids under the third and fourth generation. And we don't want to be responsible for that. I mean, we don't want to be passing on our idolatry down through the generations of our family. We should get rid of it now and end it. And some people think this commandment is a ban on like stuffed animals and pictures of deer hanging on walls. We need to read each of these commandments all the way through in their full context if we're going to understand what they're actually communicating. We can try to be sticklers on individual words, but remember that these words are all given for the purpose of communicating to us. In this case, they're communicating love to us, how to love our God. We need to read the whole commandment, not just the first half, if we're going to truly follow it. This commandment tells us not to make or use carved objects or images in his worship. This is not talking about the Holstein cow magnet on your fridge or the pink flamingo in your yard, unless it has some kind of religious meaning to you. Like if I got a sweet picture of me with a giant mullet holding my guitar and just made a shrine for it on my wall, then that would be violating this commandment. That would constitute idolatry. So remember, our Father has made it very clear that we're not to add or subtract anything from any of these commandments. The word says what it says, and we're not going to try to add any regulations to it in order to be even holier. That's not a good idea. We're not to invent and use any images, carvings, or objects when we come to worship him. So your kid can still color in his dinosaur coloring book. That's not what this commandment's talking about. Okay, the third commandment may be the most widely misunderstood. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God, Jehovah thy Elohim, in vain. For he will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. All right, let's look at this kind of carefully. Not to take or lift oneself up in the name or the reputation of Jehovah our God in vain is not to claim his name for ourselves in emptiness, vanity, or falsehood. Those are what these words mean. This has nothing to do with cussing, Now, we shouldn't run around being obnoxiously rude to sweet old church ladies with our colorful vocabularies, but that's not what this is talking about. This is making a way more important point. I mean, do you really think that commandment number 3 is worried about cussing? Really? Murder is number 6. This is talking about people running around who claim the name of God by calling themselves Christians or whatever, or saying how they represent Yahweh and tarnish his reputation by doing so in emptiness. They use his name to gain religious status in the sight of men. That's what this is talking about. Jehovah is saying here that if we take his name, we are responsible to correctly represent his character and not to dirty his reputation. We better not claim his name unless we are dead serious about being ambassadors of his true loving character. You know, a big reason of why so many people decided that they want nothing to do with God is because they saw someone who claimed to represent him not conduct themselves in the true loving righteousness of the one they took the name of. Lawless, unloving, fake modern Christianity has largely misrepresented God's true righteous and loving character. And those loud, hypocritical individuals who have turned people away from God will have their blood on their hands come the judgment. If we take his name, we better represent his patience, his love, and holy righteousness, because people are watching. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. This should sober anyone who claims his holy name, for he will hold us accountable. All right. Now for the 4th commandment,